I thought episode 2 is a television masterpiece. I really do. There's no way on earth that they're killing Ellie.
I wish they would.
There's a Christ-shaped hole in this story,
yes,
too.
Yeah. Jesse, in that episode, he ultimately comes to this sense of purpose.
Season 1 was all about fatherhood, but season 2 is about motherhood.
Joel robs her of a purpose.
We get a really good inverted picture of Christ. So there's a really remarkable imagery of the truth of Scripture, even in a broken world of The Last of Us.
You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films and TV shows for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie and TV consumption. I'm David.
And I'm Jam.
And this week we're reviewing Season 2 of The Last of Us, produced by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, and starring Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, Isabella Merced, Caitlin Dever, and other people that I didn't write down. We're not going to do a spoiler-free section. So here's your spoiler alert.
Go into it. Yeah.
Going right into it.
Well, and this is the big one too. So we have been, for this season, David and I have been getting together every Tuesday night and recording weekly minisodes. We did one for episode 1 through 6. But now this is the big finale. So this is going to be our last episode. It's going to be a full-length episode. And so we're going to start with the summary for episode 7, Convergence. Now I saw, and maybe I got this wrong, but I saw the monster that's in the end, or the end of the monster. Was that
the book?
No. For the episode title. Did I get that wrong? I probably got that wrong. I thought
it's Convergence, but she picks up a book with that title. It's like the
monster that ends, the monster that's at the end
of this book or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's I think it was Grover, if I'm not mistaken. If I remember my Sesame Street characters correctly, I think it's Grover.
You're right. You're okay. Yeah. Okay. For some reason, I thought they named the episode, but Convergence. So
that would have been
cool. That's what I thought. Yeah. That would have been good writing.
I looked at it again and I was like, oh, okay, they're going there with it. They're very intentional with all the books and all of the songs and all of the media references, the posters. Very intentional filmmaking for sure.
Episode 7, Convergence, is more than just a book about Grover.
That's right.
So it starts out essentially right after Ellie has tortured Nora. And so Ellie returns to the theater and she ends up finding Jesse and Dina, who ended up working out the arrow that was stuck in Dina's leg. And she got that arrow from the Seraphites. And so what we see is Ellie and Jesse, they go back out into in the morning to find Tommy. And this is after the fact that Ellie reveals to Dina that she knew what Joel did to the Fireflies. And she knew why they came for him at Jackson Hole. And so this is a big revelation for Dina. She kind of gives her Ellie the cold shoulder. And so Ellie and Jesse, they go out on the street. Well, while they're on the road, the war between Wolf and the Seraphites is continuing to rage. And we see Ellie and Jesse having to allow a Seraphite to die at the hands of a wolf. And Ellie struggles with that morally, which is interesting for her character. And then Ellie follows a lead to the location of Abby. And so there were 2 words that Nora gave her, whale and wheel. And so she ends up finding this aquarium and is following these leads to try to get to Abby. Well, Jesse leaves Ellie. He's not going to go with her on this quest for vengeance. And he's hoping to find Tommy. But lo and behold, being the stand-up guy Jesse is, he returns at the very last minute for Ellie with Tommy. And it's right after Ellie has accidentally killed Mel and has killed not Elliot, but Owen. So what ends up happening is they go back to the theater, and Ellie and Jesse, they end up making up with one another. They're no longer upset with each other. And there's a sound. They're in the theater. There's a sound. They go running, and Tommy's back here too. And they make a plan. They're going to go back. Well, they go running after that sound. There's gunshots and everything. And then out of nowhere, there's Abby. And so sound for the gunshots go off. The screen goes black right after Abby is pointing the gun at Ellie. And that's kind of where they end it.
Yeah. Well, and after Jesse gets shot, we see Jesse
gets shot. Yes.
And then after the fade to black or cut to black, we get a little flashback. It's one little weird nod, which actually, as long as we're on the subject, I wanted to ask you about. So, once again, all the spoilers, but the Seattle day 1, day 2, day 3. Remember, you said that you had only gotten so far in terms of the game.
Yes.
But because of the nonlinear nature of the show, was there stuff later on in the show that you saw and said, I remember that from the game, it's just that it happened in a different order? Like the flashback scenes or the parts with Abby?
So the parts with Jesse in the theater, I had already played through. So I already knew that was going on. The flashbacks that happened in the episode with Joel, with the museum and the dinosaur and all that, I had already played through. I don't think
Jesse in the theater where Jesse gets shot?
No. I haven't gotten there yet. Which I'm very disappointed.
I know. Well, I hear they made changes. Maybe there'll be some surprises in the game for it.
I hope that's a change to the game because I love the character of Jesse.
I do too. Yeah.
No. Jesse coming to the theater where Dina is. And in the game, Dina and Jesse are a little more intimate's not the right word, but I guess it would be. They're a little more intimate with one another than we see in the show. Dina kind of plays it off like they've been broken up for some time, but Jesse and Dina in the game seem to actually have some consideration for one another, especially after Jesse's whole conversation of like, I don't love Dina in the same way you love Dina, Ellie, that whole talk there. That doesn't seem to be the case in the game, at least from what I've played.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And so, like you said earlier, week 7, right? Popcorn Theology, week 7.
We're still here, man.
Yeah, we made it. We made it each Tuesday. So I will say thanks so much for going on this journey with me. This is my first time going through a show week by week. And if I'm being honest, it might be the last time. I haven't quite decided yet. I don't know of many other shows that are going to warrant this level of attention.
Yeah.
And I guess what's one thing we'll discuss is whether this one warranted this level of attention. They say that Proverbs says the end of a thing is better than its beginning, which is very optimistic when it comes to TV shows, and we'll get into that. But I will say it's been a great opportunity to dive into this show with you.
Man.
So
I'm glad I got to.
Yeah. So if anyone's joining us just for the season summary, we wanted to very briefly just kind of give you an idea of what you missed in the last 6 episodes, because there's a lot in this show, a lot to discuss, and we are going to miss some points in this one because they've already been addressed in the previous minisodes. So in episode 1, Future Days, we talked about how choices have consequences, and we also explored a little bit of Joel's regret over what he had done and concealed from Ellie.
Yeah, and then we had episode 2, which was Through the Valley. And so we talked about morality and the cycles of vengeance and how those things can change the individual. And then we talked about the importance of forgiveness, which we argued was distinctly Christian.
Yes, right. And that gets explored a good bit in the following episode, The Path, episode 3, where the characters we're exploring grief as they grieve the loss of Joel. But then also we see this really interesting debate over mercy versus justice as they try and decide what to do about Joel's killers.
Yeah. And then day 1, episode 4, we have sexuality. We have the creative order that we talked through. And then we talked about the lengths that we go to justify our sin. And so you're already probably picking up on a theme or repeated themes that go throughout. And I think the show did really well with that.
It does. Yeah. Certain themes did great in single episode kind of containment. And then certain ones we intentionally put off because we knew that they would make more sense in hindsight, or had hoped that they would at least. In episode 5, which is called Feel Her Love, we really discussed the main theme there of Ellie's recklessness, but also her fearlessness, and how that episode in the season as a whole explores why she has such reactions to the conditions around her.
Now, then we have episode 6. Was that called The Path as well?
Nope, probably not.
Well,
I think I
episode
just wrote
6
it down wrong.
has another
Whatever
title
it was
name.
called. Yeah.
And that one
I'll
was
check.
Loving by Lying and A Little Better Than Me. And so we talked about legacy. And so that was the episode with Joel where we get all the flashbacks and we get pieced into what actually went down between him and Ellie. Now, the season gives you a lot of it almost feeds you a lot of information or gives you a lot of good assumption skills here. Like, oh, this is what probably happened. But this episode actually clues you in and says, this is how it went down.
Yeah. And so I typed it wrong. It's The Path is the name for episode 3, and it's The Price for episode 6.
There it
Every
is.
path has a price. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I think my brain was just like, you don't need to really think about what you're writing here. So much to discuss. What we're going to do first, though, is we're going to do our popcorn and theology ratings just for episode 7, in keeping with our pattern that we've done so far.
Yep.
And then we'll do the same for the season as a whole. So first, our popcorn ratings. We've got stale, fresh, and buttered and salted for bad, good, and great in terms of the entertainment quality. I thought this episode was fresh. I thought it moved the story forward. There were good revelations. There were some really gripping moments, especially the moment with Mel. Very few moments in TV shows get me audibly reacting, and that was one of them. And also some excellent fleshing out of Jesse as a character, which is something I was hoping to see more of, and now it turns out we've seen probably almost all of it, except some flashbacks. And so, I thought fresh overall, so good. What are your thoughts?
What kept you from buttered and salted? That's where I landed. What kept you from butter and salted versus fresh?
I think there's just a disappointment about the way that episodes like this end. I mean, I would call it a cliffhanger. It's a TV show. It's not exactly fair to call it a cliffhanger. It did feel a little cheap, even for a season finale, to end the way that it does. And so I didn't love that. I could probably be convinced. Right now I have it as fresh, though. Why should I have it as buttered and salted?
I landed on butter and salted, and I'm going to start this way, which isn't going to convince you it's butter and salted, but I hated Ellie in this episode. And I almost feel like you're supposed to hate Ellie in this episode. There was a point where the Seraphites get her, right? And they're about to hang her. And I'm just like, that should be it. She should be done. And there was even the point where you've got the blackout because Abby is pointing at Ellie. And my wife and I are hoping, I hope Abby got Ellie. Like I don't know why. I just hated her in this episode. Part of that is probably because of my love for Jesse and their whole conflict that you have going on there. I think that was really good conflict. And you're seeing, she's even making the argument of, you're not better than me kind of thing. And you say you do everything for the community, but you're not. Like that whole argument there, I thought was really good conflict between the two. But you see Ellie continuing in that. And I think she was morally the wrong one here. And it's unfortunate he lost his life because of that.
She was justifying. Yeah, she's rationalizing.
Yeah. So, I mean, that theme came up again. And that I appreciated that because we had talked about her justifying her own actions and what vengeance was doing to her. And ultimately, vengeance led to the death of her best friend. But the thing about this show that I think was buttered and salted was the fact that the show has a way of bringing you in. I remember watching, and we had those 2 episodes of just Ellie, and me being like, this is so boring. I don't want to watch this anymore. I got a popcorn episode, so I got to watch this. I remember that. And then you have the episode with Joel, and I'm like, I'm back in. Like, this is great. This is what I've wanted to see. You're telling me the story I wanted to see. And then this episode, even though I hated Ellie, watching this episode, I don't know if they were trying to make you hate Ellie, but I'm watching and I'm like, I dislike her decisions here, but I was pulled in the entire time. So this is an episode where Bella Ramsey nailed it. Like,
Mm.
I think she did well. And my wife quite literally said after the episode, the blackout happens, and she said, "Why does the show have to do that so often?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "This show just pulls you in. It just has a way of pulling you in to where you're watching it and you're just kind of like, I'm done with it." But then out of nowhere, it's like, "Oh, I got you back.
And I'm back. Yeah.
I got your back." And
It's like you're on the end of a hook, and the fisherman's giving you some line and then tugging, doing that thing. Yeah.
And I saw too, because it piqued my interest. I saw too that I think it was the director of the show said that they would have to at least go to season 4 to be able to tell the entire story arc for Abby. And I was intrigued.
4?
Yeah, up to season 4.
You're going Peter Jackson with this, huh?
I think so. Like
it's going to be a
3-parter.
1 game, 3 seasons. And I'm like, if you're going to do that, go back to season 1 and do multiple seasons out of season 1 or game 1.
They really did. They rushed season 1 a lot, but season 1 that was a solid season.
It was so good. Yeah.
And then this one, it piqued my interest at the end when you have Abby and Ellie showing down with each other and her saying, "I saved you. I let you live," kind of thing. I wasn't as inclined to her character when she killed Joel, but in that moment, I was way more inclined because it's like the decision she made led to this moment here. And I want to see what other decisions she made that led to this moment. So that's part of the like roping you in thing too.
Yeah, the flashback to seeing from Abby's POV, where it's even shot behind her as she's walking. Which, having not played the game and knowing not a ton about video games, I do know that that's the main way you interact with the characters is from kind of upper angle from behind. And so I was like, oh, I think I know what's about to happen. And then that's revealed.
We're gonna start playing Abby now.
We're gonna start playing Abby. Yeah, this is gonna be interesting. Which I had said last week. I was like, almost be more interesting if we played it as Abby, or if we watched it as Abby, and then later realized who she's going after.
Yep.
But, anyway, this is great. We're kind of teetering into our theology rankings, and so we'll go ahead and get into that. So for that, we have diluted, carbonated, or my cup runneth over in terms of how much there is to talk about in terms of biblical themes and discussion points. And for this one, I'm curious what you think. I put cup runneth over for this one. I said there's a lot that gets tied up in this episode, even though not narratively tied up. Certain themes get tied up over the course of this, including things like community, sacrifice, selfishness. And we even have a little bit of a Good Samaritan moment, which we'll talk more about later. But how did you rank this one?
It was carbonated.
That's funny. So I said good and then great for discussion. You said great, good for discussion.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
I was hoping to see a lot more of the themes come to climax in this episode. So I think while you do see some of them wrap up, I don't think you've seen all of what has been explored in this season wrapped up. And so for me, the season as a whole, and this being the last episode, I would have liked to see the themes themselves wrapped up.
Sure.
Justice, vengeance. I think particularly because of how they ended it, you don't see if vengeance was carried out. You don't see if justice was carried out. And I have a theory. I was curious. We're kind of already here. I was curious who you think pulled the trigger.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think that there's no way on earth that they're killing Ellie.
I wish they would.
I think that there's no way that they're going to kill Ellie halfway through game 2 or a third of the way through the game 2 story. I also don't think that Abby is going to miss Ellie right after making that incredible kill shot on Jesse.
Yeah.
The second he walks out the door. I mean,
I was
obviously
so
it's tragic
mad
that he
about
died,
that.
but I'm incredibly impressed with her skills as a markswoman.
Yep.
So I really doubt she missed. I doubt they killed Ellie. We don't know where Dina is. So spoilers, here's my prediction. I think Dina picked her off from the
Same here.
From the balcony or whatever area she was concealed in.
Yep.
That's what you think happened?
I think it was Dina. Yeah, I think Dina pulls the trigger there.
Yeah.
Which would be interesting too, because the character, she's the one that says we have to go home, right? She gives the
Yeah.
cold shoulder to Ellie. She's given up this mission. She realizes she made a mistake. They should not have come. Like, she says so much in her body language and just that one phrase, "We have to go home."
She's great.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that was great. And I think it will be interesting for the character. If it is Dina that pulled the trigger, it will be interesting for the character because she will have pulled the trigger on the very individual in which vengeance was being sought after. I think that would be interesting. Yeah.
Mm. I think so too. I do think that it's almost too predictable. If they're trying to make this a gripping ending, not for an episode, but for a season.
Yep.
If that is what happened, I do feel like it was a little transparent. But if we're wrong, maybe it's just misdirection. I don't know. Maybe they do kill Ellie.
I asked my wife. I was like, "Do you think maybe it was Jesse? Maybe Jesse just pulled it. He's still alive.
Jesse's over there alive. Like."
That's
it's like that SNL clip. What you say? Where they just keep taking turns shooting each other.
See, I was thinking the Batman spoof on YouTube where Batman doesn't know that he's killing people. It's like, what do you think's happening here? They're sleeping. It's like, maybe Jesse was just sleeping.
Who knows? Yeah. Oh. Funny stuff.
That would make this the greatest season ever if that's what happened.
If that was somehow Jesse. Or what if it was Joel that shot her? Oh, goodness. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. Hopefully you don't have to wait as long for this one. Goodness gracious. They better have it like half filmed and ready to go since it's going to be kind of, a part 1 of 3, I guess, sort of deal. Yep. I thought possibly they would finish the game 2, not knowing where exactly that game ends. I thought maybe they would do that with this one and then release game 3 and then work on season 3. Because from what I understand, they didn't start writing they didn't finish rather writing the second game until the first season of the show was released. So there was a bit of overlap in terms of the timing there, or at least until the first season was being produced. And so, there was some overlap in terms of the production there. And so I wouldn't have been upset about that. And I'm sure that there will be more games released. This is just too successful. HBO is going to milk it. I'm sure Naughty Dog is also going to milk it.
Has to,
But with all that being said, for episode 7, we want to kind of go back over the whole season and give it our rankings there, or ratings there as well for the first season, for the second season here, our kind of big picture popcorn thoughts, as well as, some nitpicks, which we've already gotten into a little bit. And so I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind. I've been very positive. I said of these 6 episodes we've reviewed so far, I called 3 buttered and salted and 3 fresh. The whole season, though, I'm going to go ahead and call it fresh. I thought it was a good season. I'm not going to call it buttered and salted, though. And that's because while individual episodes were great, in terms of the overall story, I thought it could have been better. To be honest, it felt a little bit like watching Dune. I remember when I got out of the theater watching Dune, I was like, that was amazing. And I am so frustrated at the same time because it was half of a movie is what it was. And I was expecting a full movie. Even if it was part 1, you can do part 1 movies that resolve in a way that is satisfying. Fellowship of the Ring, right? The whole Lord of the Rings trilogy does a really good job with that. And so this almost felt like Dune part 1. And so for that reason, I'm sure once I've seen the rest of where the story goes, that it'll all be much more coherent. But for now, I'm just calling it good. What about you? What are you thinking?
Well, I had 2 fresh, 1, 2, 3 buttered and salted, and 1 stale. Mm-hmm. The season 2 overall, I'd probably rate it fresh. Part of me, the pacing. I think the pacing is the biggest thing with this. They started off really strong, and then they end up going just really slow. And I don't know that they've given you enough reason to like the characters and the way they're going with the story. And it's almost like a stop, start, stop, start, stop. And you just can't figure out if you're on or if you're off. And that was my experience watching the entire time. I one Sunday I would be like, oh man, this was a good episode. I can't wait to talk about it. And then the next Sunday I'd be like, why am I watching this? Like, I'm done watching this thing. So I give it fresh because the themes, even on the bad episodes that I just didn't like, the discussion around those episodes have been fruitful. They've encouraged me to think about it in different ways. As a viewer, I'm frustrated with it. But then as I'm sitting down and actually engaging with it thoughtfully, I'm like, oh no, David's got some good points. Okay, this is good. So that's where I would land there is probably fresh.
Fresh seems fair, I think. I mean, because, and it's funny because the same ones, and we got into this in our minisodes, but we both called the same ones Buttered and Salted, which was episode 2, the attack on Jackson, episode 3, them discussing basically grieving and discussing what to do about Joel's killers. And then episode 6, the one with the flashbacks. To be honest, I thought episode 2 is a television masterpiece. I really do. I think that it was, at the time I compared it to an episode of Breaking Bad called Ozymandias. I think that holds. And then in, as far as episode 6, I thought that was also a masterpiece, but for incredibly different reason. It was dramatically poignant, and it was beautiful, and there was joy and character development that was so fulfilling and rich. And in the episode 2, we have incredible action. We have great plot development as well, but they were just wonderful for very different reasons. The show seems to have a sprint and then stroll kind of approach. Like, hurry up and wait. There was also
Almost
some really
like
cool. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, almost like it couldn't figure out what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like there are moments in this, even with the way it ended. So I think what season 1 did really well, season 1 being a zombie show stood out from The Walking Dead for me. The Walking Dead is like your, like, I don't want to say cheap to like demean The Walking Dead for what it is. It's great, but it's like your cheap television zombie show versus this, which is like high-end zombie show. And in many episodes in this, even with the way they ended this season, I'm just reminisce about The Walking Dead. Like, oh, this is something that they kind of did in The Walking Dead, or this is how they explored it. The blackout thing, that's the same with Negan. When Negan gets introduced and Lucille, and he's picking people out of the group to kill, they black it out. And like, you don't know who he kills until the very next. And that's kind of what they did here. And I'm like, The Walking Dead did that.
It's almost like a Simpsons did it kind of thing. Like,
and then you have episode 2. I think I'm thinking correctly. Is it 28 Days Later? But that's a vampire.
No,
that's like
right.
That's like a big vampire zombie. Or, but even with that, it's like big scale, like action sequences kind of thing. And you have that with episode 2, where it's like, oh man, this is big scale action sequences with the zombies, and then it scales it back down drastically. So I do. Not only is it the stop start with like storytelling, but it's also like, we don't know what we want to be. Do we want to be The Walking Dead? Do we want to be our own thing? Yeah.
And I think to the credit, I think, because I agree that having that kind of pacing can be jarring. You can get a little bit of narrative whiplash, but it is, again, to keep going back to Breaking Bad. That's one thing Breaking Bad did so incredibly well. The story would progress really quickly, and then you would have long stretches where they would pause and focus in on a character or on a particular development. And so I think that this did try and do at least what Breaking Bad did. One thing that also stood out to me, I don't know if you're the type that skips the theme song. I love the imagery and I love the music, and so I rarely skip the opening theme. But did you notice what they did with the 2 figures in that opening sequence?
I skipped everything.
You skipped everything. Oh man, you're a skipper. He's a skipper. Why would you skip the theme song, George? All right,
I did that with Daredevil too. I just skipped.
I did that. Okay, I did that with the remake or the new Daredevil, because I'm like, this isn't the original. I love the song in the original. I used to leave that one on. Okay, so what they did, so it shows the cordyceps, it shows the the spreading, it shows the map, it shows the skull, and then it shows this sort of field, I guess. And then we get the two figures, one taller than the other one, that symbolize Joel and Ellie, all through season 1. And beginning in episode 3 of season 2, there's one figure to the side. It's just Ellie. And it's so like, it hits hard. And they kept it just Ellie up until the flashback episode. I really thought once Dina and Ellie were off on their own, they would show two equally sized figures. But nope, they had one tall and one small. Then it was just Ellie. And then eventually we see the two of them together again for the flashback episode. And that's it. So yeah, that I thought was pretty neat. And there's also some really interesting parallels in terms of the filmmaking, because in this episode 7, when Dina finds out what Joel did through Ellie, she turns away from Ellie, not just emotionally. She literally rolls over, facing away from her. That's exactly what Ellie did in the car on the way out of Salt Lake City. She rolls over away from Joel. She doesn't know exactly what happened yet, but she's, I think, already at that point suspicious.
Yep.
But as far as nitpicking, I think we've talked about this a little bit. The show did so much very well. I really do think that. And some of the casting choices were great. I'm actually really growing on Bella Ramsey as Ellie. I think she plays a really compelling Ellie, especially because she has to play the range of really likable and innocent to someone who's turned into almost a monster. That's hard to pull off, and she's done both.
Likable?
Yeah, episode 6. The flashback.
She was. The flashback was likable, yeah.
And she's a kid, yeah. Those ones.
Yeah, those are fine.
Well, it shows the transition from that to, where is she? Swear to me.
What happened to Ellie?
What happened? We don't talk about Ellie. But I will say, overall, I am starting to kind of come around to this idea that Abby was miscast. I love Caitlin Dever. I just don't think she's right for that character. She's just not particularly menacing. And she's trying her hardest. I think it's just obvious she's trying really hard to be menacing. And I think there were better people to cast for that part. Additionally, the rest of her crew, they could have shown them be more battle hardened, right? We see them at the beginning, they're teenagers, they're somehow spared from this whole thing. And then if we saw them 5 years later, if they had been in Kansas City as part of the KC mob, they would have been like rough. If they had even been like Isaac's guy that we see in that one moment where he goes forward, we can tell stuff has happened and he's changed. The group, Abby's crew, it kind of looks like a college camping trip. Like no one seems particularly like put out that they're crawling through the wilderness in the post-apocalyptic world. They weren't battle hardened. And so I think that they could have done a better job in terms of either casting or direction or makeup or something like that.
So
I don't know.
I agree with you with her crew. I have to say, though, in this last episode, the very last couple minutes with Caitlin Dever as Abby, I was bought in.
Really?
That moment, her acting was on point for me. And so I've seen people making the argument of like, she's too scrawny. She didn't put on enough muscle. Like she's supposed to be an ex-military. She doesn't look ex-military. Like I've seen all those arguments. And when she's killing Joel, I didn't believe it in those moments either. It's like, it didn't feel genuine. That's where I felt like she was really, really trying. That last scene though, in episode 7, I was bought in. Okay. This is Abby. I'm here.
Huh.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how it's been for me with Ellie too. Right. So one episode I'll be like, yep, that's Ellie. And then the next episode, like, I hate Ellie. I hate this.
Yeah, I guess we'll see, and whenever season 3 comes out, and we'll review that, I'm sure in some format. And we'll see what we think about Caitlin at that point. I'm just at this point, I really think that she just she hasn't been kicked around enough by life in terms of the way she's acting. She's trying really hard to look that way, but there's just something about her. She's really put together. It's not the physical build. That wasn't so much of concern for me, but anyway, sound off in the comments, by the way, guys. Let us know what you think, because I know this has been divisive, and people have opinions about the casting of Abby, more so than the casting of anyone else, which I think is interesting.
It is interesting, yeah.
But anyway, so let's go ahead and get into our theology ratings for season 2. And so for this one, I thought that this was overall cup runneth over. I do think that this one had a lot of excellent themes. We get exploration of the themes that we mentioned in the previous 6 minisodes. Also, vengeance, forgiveness, and motherhood are really explored so much in season 2. I don't know. What did you think? How did you rank season 2 in terms of theology?
Let's see. I had 1 runneth over. I had 3 carbonated and 2 diluted. Yeah, I really enjoyed with this season how each episode seemed to have its own contained theme. And we've been watching for 7 weeks now and saying, well, maybe we'll see that theme come up. We're thinking we're going to see that. And it really does seem like they've contained those themes for the most part. And those episodes really highlighted those. And almost that's why I ranked this episode as low as I did, not runneth over, but carbonated, is because I would have liked to see those themes actually tied up better than what we saw them tied up with. Part of that's the nature of how they ended the episode. I don't know. That's hard, man. Maybe I think I would carbonate. I think I'd go carbonated.
Carbonated. Fair
just
enough.
Because I didn't see the completion and the themes the way I'd hope to see the completion of the themes. Not because there's not content there. I think there's plenty to discuss with this season. It's the execution of the season, I think, that gives it that rating for me.
That's totally fair. I agree with that. The execution could have been better no matter what. It's funny, you had the way yours broke down. Mine actually broke down 2, 2, and 2. So I had 2 for diluted, which means not that much in terms of themes or discussion points. 2 for carbonated, which is, a moderate amount, an average amount of, themes and stuff to explore. And then cup runneth over is just, there's so much to talk about. I had an even 2, 2, and 2, but I overall called the whole season cup runneth over, because the things
I was surprised by that
at least attempt to explore, I think, are really valuable and really meaningful, and they explore some of them very well. And then others, even for a show that is, as far as I can tell, written and produced by non-believers. But some of it, I think we're just struggling with that unsatisfying ending. I'm sure once we get to the end of season 3, we'll have a better handle. Yep. I'm just getting tired of saying that.
Already, it just ended.
I'm already, because we kept saying that for all of the other episodes. I'm like, this one was okay, but I can tell it's going somewhere really good. And now at the end, I'm like, and that's one reason I knocked it down to fresh, because I was like, really, guys?
Yep.
But I will go back to our theme verse for season 2, which I called way back in episode 1. Proverbs 14.
You called it.
Yeah, and Jam was sitting there like trying to, because he knew what would happen in episode 2. Proverbs 14:12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. And that, I think, is such an excellent description, not just of, it seems right to a man, Joel. It also seems right to mankind, Ellie. Ellie's decisions, Abby's decisions, all of these characters' decisions. Ultimately, they seem right to them, but they end up leading to death. We see cycles of violence explored in this series, especially season 2. The wolves and the scars are an excellent example of that. They're just going round and round and round. Almost reminds me a little bit of the Jews and the Samaritans, right? Kind of going round and round in terms of the aggression between them. We've got Joel taking out Abby's dad, leading to Abby seeking out Joel, and essentially motivating Ellie to go after Abby. And it's just eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, till the whole world is blind and toothless. And, we even see opportunities where Ellie can break that cycle, where Dina says, we need to go home. We need to get out of this. Because even though Dina is on board because of what happened to her family, she then says, Joel wasn't innocent. That changes things. We need to go home. And Ellie seems on board with it from time to time, but she just keeps going back. She can't help herself. She's like an addict. She keeps going back, seeking revenge. So yeah, we're going to get to more of these themes after we drop the ads. Any other, quick big picture theology rating points before we do that, though?
I don't think Ellie was okay with going home.
Mm.
Even from the moment of let's go home, I don't think she was okay with it. I think she was, if anything, she was appeasing Dina.
I don't think she was okay with it either.
Yeah.
I think she was just kind of resigned to it.
Yeah.
But she did keep, every time she had an opportunity, like, just kidding, we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, before we get to the rest of the show and the discussion themes, we want to encourage you to like and share this episode with your friends, especially if you like what you hear. Help us broaden that conversation.
Yeah, and if you want to hear more, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, or you can follow us on social media, things like Facebook, Instagram, and even on Discord.
That's right. And one quick way that you can help support the podcast is just to rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen, or you can support us financially through Patreon.
Yeah, donating just a few dollars a month will make you what we call a patron saint. And this actually gives you special access to a whole host of exclusive benefits, including things like a exclusive Facebook group and a special channel on our public Discord server. The ability even to vote on future episodes and to get exclusive content.
That's right. And another thing that we're doing is a bit of a giveaway in exchange for some reviews and ratings. If they're on iTunes, then send an email to feedback@popcorntheology.com and you'll get some free stickers just as a thank you for helping get the word out there. Because we love what we do. We want more people to get involved in those discussions, and those ratings and reviews go a really long way in helping us reach a broader audience. So we're going to drop some ads, and we'll come back after the break to talk more about The Last of Us Season 2.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane!
Cinemagogue, The Marvelous Era. James Harleman here, the cinema guy, announcing the sequel to my first book on film and faith. Let's face it, entertainment has changed dramatically since the first book published in 2012, and comic book characters and franchises are everywhere. So I decided to set my sights on superheroes and examine the evolution of Hollywood in this follow-up to the first Cinemagogue book. For example, what does Loki tell us about culture's view of God? Why does the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Infinity Saga continually align with biblical themes? In the Marvelous Era, I review each film and show not only how the individual movies express gospel parallels, but each phase essentially reveals a multi-point sermon. I also explore DC, Star Wars, the Monsterverse, and more. Without compromising scriptural truth, we can sift these stories and discover how we might reject, receive, and redeem ideas for personal reflection and Christian conversation. Also, has Hollywood's messaging gotten worse? The book explores ways these marvelous mythologies correspond with conversion, Christian living, church history, and Reformation, but I do also highlight what has been the entertainment industry's darker, indoctrinating decade, as well as toxic fandom and the dangers of immersion in pop culture that just might drown us spiritually if we're not careful. So suit up, assemble, and join me on a journey to the Infinity Saga and beyond. Cinemagogue, The Marvel Us Era. Now available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle editions. Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community, and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's a big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com.
If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself. Everything that I've found here, I've not found by myself.
All right, and we are back, and it's time for us to go ahead and pour and sample some of the more spiritual aspects of this film or show and its narrative. So we're shifting gears and discussing Last of Us Season 2 as a whole, not just Episode 7.
Yep.
And so, Sham, what was one of the themes that stood out to you from this season?
Honestly, living with a purpose. And we are talking season as a whole, but one thing that really made me start thinking about that theme more and thinking back on the season is Jesse, multiple times in Episode 7, states that he is a father, and that Dina is a mother, and that they are not going to die out here for Ellie's revenge. And so you see with Jesse in that episode, he ultimately comes to this sense of purpose as a new father. And I don't think that the show was meaning to do this, but it was really beautiful to see that he's acknowledging that what is inside of Dina is a human being with value, dignity, and worth. And that is such a huge deal, because that becomes the purpose of Jesse in that whole episode. And that made me start thinking back through the theme of purpose throughout the series. Of course, we have the episode where Ellie and Joel are engaging with one another, and Ellie essentially accuses Joel of robbing her of her purpose. He tells her, "You're going to die. You were going to die. They were going to kill you, and I saved you." So Joel robs her of a purpose. She essentially thinks, she wholeheartedly believes that her purpose was to die to provide a cure for humanity. And then I start thinking through the character of Joel. And what's interesting that you see within that episode too is Joel wholeheartedly believes that his purpose was to raise Ellie, to protect Ellie, to save Ellie. Like that drives his entire motives. They go to Jackson Hole and they become a part of this community. Well, it's not because he loves the community. It's because he loves Ellie. His whole purpose becomes Ellie. Like, I have to protect her and care for her. Or then you even think of Dina. There's a little nod in episode 7, which made me think back to, I think it's the first episode. In the first episode, we're introduced to Dina, and you see her at the party. And at the party, she's drunk. She's had too much to drink. Well, then Jesse makes a comment in the 7th episode. Dina, who has never refused a drink in her life, refuses a drink when she has an arrow in her leg, and he has to push the arrow through so he doesn't, rip arteries. And that makes me think through the fact that she has discovered her purpose. Like, her purpose is to be a mother. And that's a really beautiful scene in the introduction of episode 7, right? She's refusing alcohol, which would numb the pain, for the sake of protecting the sanctity of life that she has created and currently growing. And man, purpose is a theme that runs throughout this entire series. We see that purpose ran throughout the entirety of season 1, right? Joel was without a purpose when his daughter died. And it's no wonder his purpose becomes Ellie, because Ellie is almost replacing that purpose he once had. And I think that theme of purpose resonates with so many viewers, so many people who are watching this, because we all want to live with a purpose. So, I mean, and I think of the fact that, like, even within my own life, I've had multiple times of just saying, I want my life to mean something. And I think this season resonates with that thought process. I want my life to mean something. And so that led me down a rabbit hole. Ecclesiastes 12:13-14. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Ecclesiastes is fitting, especially with episode 7. It's fitting because it's the father giving his wisdom to his son as to what the purpose of life is. Or you think of Psalm 17:15. And I, in righteousness, I will see your face when I awake. I will be satisfied with seeing your likeness. Man will be satisfied when we see God face to face in fellowship, and to be like him in righteousness. That's what David's writing about in the Psalm here. Or you go to Psalm 73:25. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides for you. This is Asaph's relationship with God, which is all that mattered to him. His life was without purpose without it. Or you think of this, the chief end of man is to glorify God by enjoying him forever, as John Piper states. We certainly do have purpose in raising children, like Jesse points out. We certainly do have purpose in laying down our life for others, right? No love has greater love than this, that a friend lays down his life for another friend, right? The scriptures are clear about raising children, about laying down your life for another, sacrificial parenthood. So it is with all of the things that we do in life. All things we do in life have purpose. And here's the purpose. 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Ultimately, there is a huge God-shaped hole within the season. And that God-shaped hole is everyone in this season and in season 1. They are living without a legitimate purpose because apart from glorifying God in all they do, their life is, as Ecclesiastes would say, meaningless. And that can be depressing.
Yeah.
Life is meaningless. But at the end of the day, too, it's no wonder that we're picking up on so many theological themes, because it's like they aren't living like their life is meaningless. And that's where the God-shaped hole comes in. Why would any created being ever act like their life has purpose if, in fact, there was no God? That's the question that's posed.
That's a good point, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a life under the sun type story, right? To use categories that James Harleman wrote about in his book Cinemagogue, that stories are either life under the sun, where they show that that meaninglessness of life, they show a life apart from the creator, or they are life transcendent, where characters are shown that there is something beyond. In this case, I would say for the most part, this is a life under the sun story. And in terms of the purpose, I mean, I love what you said about, even having children and being a parent is not our ultimate purpose. I mean, and that's such a key distinction, because that's one thing that I don't think we really got into much in the previous episode, but in episode 6, that was definitely one of the thoughts that I had, was that, we have a character who, much like Romans 1, worshipped and serves the created thing rather than the creator. Joel has made an idol out of Ellie. And maybe Ellie's made an idol out of Joel too, but it's pretty obvious that Joel is so protective of Ellie, of his daughter, his surrogate daughter, that he's putting her in the place of where his ultimate value should be.
Yeah.
And so many parents do that.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, and I think that the sad but important and beautiful reality is your kids will always disappoint you. Not because their disappointments are they're terrible, but because they're not meant to fulfill us.
Right.
It's not their purpose. It's not fair to expect your children to be your fulfillment. It is acutely unfair to expect that your kids, that these children that you've created, are going to come into this world and validate you. It's an incredibly selfish notion. Instead, we're supposed to point them to the Lord, and they're supposed to point us to the Lord.
Yep.
And that's it. To be enjoying the Lord and be enjoyed by him forever.
Yep.
That's the ultimate goal. Kids are going to let you down just because they're humans. Humans are going to let you down. So that's an excellent point. Yeah, I also love, you mentioned the sort of reaction that Jesse has to becoming a father. In our last episode, you mentioned a song that you had written when you found out that you were going to be a father.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of timely.
Mudblood.
Considering this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just a journal entry of finding out that I was going to be a dad. And that album it's called Heart Journal. And it was just literally a journal entry. And the guys and I in context were just kind of like, what if we just screamed over that? But that whole thought process of like, I can't believe I'm a dad. And what am I going to do? What if he turns out like me? Like, it's interesting because that's not what, it doesn't seem like that's what Jesse's going through. And of course, we're never going to know now because they did us dirty.
They did. I know. And I should have seen it coming. We're like, oh, look at that. Jesse and Ellie made up. Things are nice. Wait a minute.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it coming, honestly.
I didn't either. But in fairness, we didn't have much time to process it. We should have known, like, oh, things are going nice. Someone's about to die.
Yeah.
It's somebody that we've really come to like in this episode. And it's probably going to be Jesse. Yep, it's Jesse. Yep. Dang it. But yeah, that sense of maturity that he has, I mean, he's remarkable. He processed that, incredibly mature young man, for sure.
Even the way he dealt with Dina and Ellie, like, I mean, hats off to him as a character too, because I can't compete with that. And even if we disagree with the relational makeup there, his willingness to say, you guys love each other, so I'm just going to pull myself out of the equation. Like that was, that's some good maturity on his part. And that's
selflessness.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I was going to mention this later, but you brought up Dina's maturity when she, she grows up, right? Because she's flirtatious, she's immature, she leads Ellie on. I mean, she's really kind of awful in a lot of ways. Dina's great in other ways, but relationally, she's a mess.
Yeah.
But once she finds out that she's going to be a mother, and once she's put into that situation, she matures quick.
Yep.
And it actually parallels really well with another character, because one thing I love about this show is that the filmmakers are so intentional, right? And so the showrunners, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, do this podcast where they explore the themes in the show. And one of the things they said was season 1 was all about fatherhood, right? Obviously with Joel, fatherhood and some other characters, and the way that they violently protect the ones that they love. But season 2 is about motherhood. And honestly, until this episode, that didn't occur to me. And when they said it, they had to kind of like walk me through it, that it's about the sacrificial side of love, and it's about the way that mothers love their children. Because ultimately we have Dina, who is a mother. We have Ellie, who is in the mix. Anyway, just leave it at that.
Who is Ellie? Yeah.
And then we get this one moment where we see Mel, and this one moment where Mel is showing her maturity and saying, I'm a mother. I'm losing my life. I know I have 30 seconds, but here's what you need to do. You need to do what you can to save my child. She doesn't freak out. She doesn't grieve. She doesn't cry. She just goes straight into protection mode.
That was gut wrenching, man. Oh, dude, my goodness.
That was the part when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I can't remember what exactly I said, but I'm sure I can't say it on the podcast.
That was,
but when that happened,
I looked at my wife and I said, this is awful.
Yeah.
And the fact that it parallels, it almost looks like Ellie in that moment has like a, what if this is going to be me soon? Like having to do it to Dina kind of moment. Oh
yeah.
Yeah. That was a cool scene.
That was. And in the game, apparently she gets shot and she dies. But then the filmmakers were like, hey, what if she asks her to cut it out? And I'm like, that wasn't in the original script. That was so powerful.
That was good.
But it also paralleled what we saw at the end of season 1, which is Anna, Ellie's mom, where she has the last moments of her life to sacrifice for her daughter, right? And so she's protecting her daughter as she's born. She's protecting her from the infected. She cuts the cord and everything like that. We see Anna as a picture of sacrificial love of a mother for her daughter.
Yeah.
We see even Sarah as a surrogate mother, knows that she's been bit, but she's all the way back in season 1, episode 2, is rushing Ellie and Joel to their rendezvous point because she knows I'm going to turn here soon and I've got to help them get to their point and convince Joel to take her further. Without Sarah, Joel doesn't take Ellie anywhere.
Yep.
She's an incredibly important maternal character. And then with Mel, we see her trying to save her daughter as well. And like you said, it really points to the fact that creation order keeps shining through.
Mm-hmm.
The filmmakers, the characters, no one's saying that's a potential baby. That's something, but I don't know what it is. They're saying that's a baby.
Yep.
And they're mourning the loss of this child. And there's, the importance here of protecting the most innocent, where Ellie can rationalize killing Abby, maybe even her crew, because they were complicit. But to quote one of the producers, you can't justify killing a child. And I was like,
wow,
whoa. Like, and again, I won't presume to know the religious or political beliefs of the people making this show. I could guess, but I won't presume to know. But I thought, man, put that in a slightly different context, ever so slightly different. And that is something that would be a very controversial statement about about the sanctity of life in the womb.
Well, we live in such a time of convenience too. And if you think of the show and the setting, there is no time for convenience in the setting of the show. So it's like, it's no wonder that you have a very clear black and white, this is a baby. It's a human life. It's valuable, because they have no time for convenience of, is it really? Like, you just don't have that. You have death looming over you. you are directly biologically impacted. You just don't have the time for the convenience like we do right now. We're twiddling our thumbs and trying to make arguments that are contrary to biology and science. And it's like, that's because we don't have death looming over us like cordyceps and zombies. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. No, for sure. And I don't know what to do with this yet, but one thing I was noticing in this season is who has children in this world? Where do we see children?
Tommy has,
Yeah, so Tommy.
Is it Tommy with a son?
Other people in Jackson, right?
Were there? I don't remember seeing a whole lot of kids.
I think I saw a couple running around. But at the very least, there's some people in Jackson that have kids.
Hopefully. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also see the Seraphites have kids.
Oh, they do have kids. You're right.
And then even in this episode, we see like some really dark stuff.
Creepy
one
kid,
of the kids
yeah.
is like, yeah, go ahead and go.
Do
I'm
it.
like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, Children of the Corn style there.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right. And so as messed up as the scars seem to be, they're at least planning for the future. But one thing I noticed, the wolves don't have kids.
no, they don't, do they?
And I don't recall seeing any Fedra. We don't see a lot of Fedra in this show, but I don't recall seeing a lot of Fedra kids. They recruit orphans, which there are a lot of in this world, but there's no other people having children besides Jackson and the Seraphites. I don't know what to do with that. It's just an observation that the wolves don't seem to be in that mode. And so I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's a good eye. Yeah.
But we'll see where that explores later, because I get the feeling that when it comes to the Seraphites, we're going to be seeing a lot more because they teased so much and really delivered on so little of that in this season. It's kind of another reason it's frustrating. I thought more of that was going to come to a head.
I was hoping it would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, you are on a roll with themes. So why don't you take us away with your theme for the season?
Like I said, buttered and salted. I'll thank the writers. One of the big ones is just kind of out in the surface of this episode, which is community over self. We get a great contrast between Jesse and Ellie over the value of community. Even going back to season 2, episode 1, Ellie's like, well, I got to go to this thing because community and stuff, right? Just kind of sarcastically saying, like, I guess I'm in this community now. And so I have to go to all this social stuff I don't want to go to. But Jesse makes it clear to her. He's like, look, this is why I act the way that I do, is because I was taught to put other people first. To which Ellie immediately responds the way you would expect Ellie to respond, which is defensively. You think you're better than me. She's a child. She's 19, but she's a child. Ellie really, according to Jesse, does everything for herself. And I would say that's pretty accurate, even avenging Joel's death, even endangering the lives of the people in her crew. She's not acting in their best interest. As Jesse points out, right? He didn't even vote with her to go after Joel. She assumed he did, but he didn't, right? And he said it wasn't in the best interest of the community, to which Ellie says, F the community, right? She's a very telling statement on her part. She then compares the community to Joel, who she had to watch die. And it's just, but back to this idea of doing things for yourself versus others. Philippians 2 has a lot to say about this. It says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. It's pretty clear right there. And then especially what follows this, which, let the very mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. That whole discourse about the sacrifice of Christ in Philippians 2 is just incredible. And it's framed in this context of, hey, don't act out of your own self-interest, act out of the interest of others. And I think that was a really cool, it's right on the surface, that Jesse is acting in the best interest of the community versus Ellie. And in the case of Jackson, as we've said before, we actually get a really good picture of community. It's almost something like a city on a hill, even though it's in the Jackson Hole, if you will, that this is a place that actually still works, right? I mean, there's even discussion in episode 3 about what separates them from the Raiders, what makes them different from the world around them, and whether it is mercy and forgiveness or whether it is justice. And, there's even back in episode 1, and so much of this becomes more meaningful in hindsight with what happens later in the show, that they're arguing about whether to let more people into their community, into Jackson. Joel and Maria are discussing it. And she's saying, well, these people are coming from horrible situations. Are we supposed to just let them go, leave them out there? And he says, if our lifeboat is swamped, yeah, we leave them out there. And I'm just thinking, like, if only you know what Joel had done, he's capable of much worse than just leaving them out there. But he says, look, if it were up to me, I'd let them all in, but you've got to look after your own first, or you're no good to anyone. I was curious what you think of that point he brings up. And it's all the way back in episode 1, but it seems kind of fitting for where this one goes. I mean, do you think there's something to that point? Looking first after your own versus looking after others?
Well, I think about it in terms of pastoring a church. You have to consider the sheep and the flock. You have to consider the congregants, the members of your church. Where are they at? Where's their health at? Those kinds of things. Sometimes you can evaluate the impact or the reach of the church based on the health of your people. So if your people, for use Christian phraseology, like if they're not on fire for Christ, well, then it's no wonder they're not going out and telling their neighbor about Jesus. So then the question becomes, well, how do you as the pastor care for your people and apply the salve of the gospel to those areas your people need it in order for them to be on fire for Christ, to then go tell others about it? Typically, if you have a missional deficiency, it's because you as a pastor have not cast a clear, God-honoring picture of here is Christ and all that he's done for you. So the thought process here of like, if your boat is swamped, yeah, we're going to leave them out there because we have to look after our own first. It's like, yes, there are dying men and women all around us. If our people aren't on fire for Christ, if they're hurting in all these ways, they're not sure how to apply the gospel to their lives, well, it's no wonder they're not going out to do it. You as the pastor then need to help them to see, here's how you apply the gospel to your life. Here's why it's good news for you. And that's why you need to go tell them about it. So it's almost like if the boat is swamped, well, figure out how to repair the boat first and then go out and get them. That's kind of my thought process on that. That's what came to mind when you were talking about it.
I like that. Try and get the boat fixed, right? Get the boat taken care of. We shouldn't just be content to say, we're done. We're maxed out. We're going to close the doors here.
Yeah. It's two-sided too, right? Because there could be a tendency to be like, well, our people just aren't healthy. Therefore, we don't go tell people about Jesus. But there's an urgency. Men and women are dying every single day in neighborhoods all around us that don't know Jesus. There is urgency. So it's like, yes, you as a pastor, apply the salve of the gospel, help your people to see why Jesus is exactly who he said it was and why he will absolutely fix every single issue you have, like how the gospel works. But also, just because our people aren't healthy doesn't mean they shouldn't be going out even in their unhealth and saying, hey, I'm not healthy. I need Jesus too. I think the Lord uses our limp. He uses our weakness to bring other hurting people in. And so it's a double-edged sword there, isn't it? From a pastoral standpoint, it's like, here's how you deal with it. But then also from a practical standpoint, it's like, you still need to go tell people about Jesus. Like, yes, and that's the fix the boat and bring people in kind of thing.
I like that. I mean, and to that end, I mean, it's almost like the people who say, well, we're just not ready to become parents. We're going to wait until we're ready to become parents.
You'll never be ready.
And anyone who has kids will say,
good luck with that. Yeah.
You're never going to be ready, which means that if you keep that up, you're not going to end up having kids.
Yep.
Probably. Or at least not, intentionally,
Yeah, we want to wait till we're financially secure. It's like, well, what are you going to do when the stock market crashes again, or Trump has more tariffs on this or that? It's like you're making excuses for doing what the Lord has called you to do. That's
Yeah.
ultimately it.
Exactly.
You're making excuses for what the Lord has called you to do.
And the other thing that it reminds me of is this thing that you'll sometimes hear people say, which is, oh, well, why do we don't need to be concerned about, this or that humanitarian issue in that country or in that place far from here when we've got our own problems here. We've got our own problems here. We don't have to worry about there.
Yeah.
And that to me, and that kind of ties into a point I'll get to in a moment, which is tribalism. But I don't know. I just think it's kind of silly that okay, so only once everything is perfect here,
Yeah.
there's no problems here.
It's a
Can we
cop-out.
ever care for the destitute, ever care for the needy in another part of town or another part of the world?
I was just
just
talking with a friend of mine actually, and we were talking about mission in general. And what you see a lot of times is, at least in small town West Virginia, small town West Virginia churches are all about overseas mission, which is great. People overseas need to hear about Jesus, but it is to the detriment of their own neighborhoods. So I asked my friend, what does mission look like in small town West Virginia? He's a lay elder. What does it look like? He's been doing it for years. And I'm trying to plant a church in the very town that we're talking about. What does it look like? And he just kind of scratches his head and says, I don't know. You were just telling me you support missionaries across the sea. What are you doing here? But then, and I haven't ran into it a whole lot, but then you have the flip of, well, look at where America's at. Why are we going to, I haven't ran into that as much, at least contextually for small town West Virginia. A lot of people have a heart for overseas mission. Praise God for that. But locally here, you've got dying churches that people are not coming to. There's almost like a competitive nature. We did a preview gathering for a church plant in town here. I reached out to multiple churches in the area. None of them got back to me about us coming to use space. And it's almost this competitive. If there's a new church in the area, they'll take all the people. And I'm thinking to myself, I love the brothers and sisters you got in your own congregations. Keep them. I care more about the ones that aren't going to a church at all. Yeah. Those are the ones that need reached. Mm-hmm. It's the flip side. I don't see a whole lot of we need to fix America here and we're not sending it. Yeah. I just don't see that contextually here.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe slightly more common in charity or humanitarian circles, less so in the ministry circles or even political circles. We shouldn't support this or that military or whatever cause because, we've got our own problems here, sort of an isolationist mentality. Mm-hmm. But I think both of these, even though they're kind of coming from different directions, are converging on the same point, which is that we are called to care for our neighbors and for the world. When Jesus commissioned the disciples, he didn't say, hey, go to Panama for 2 weeks in the summer and share the gospel there and then come back and live your life the exact same way. Yep. He didn't say, just talk to your neighbors and that's it. He said, go to Jerusalem, all of Judea, then Samaria, people you don't like very much. Yep. Then to the uttermost parts of the world, all of them. They're called to. The short-term missions thing, I've been on a couple short-term trips and I've known other people to go on short-term trips. And I think at times, I honestly think they may do more harm than good.
Statistically, they do.
And I do think that the big problem is that when you send people to another country, you think that they're going to somehow be different there than they are back home. So you won't share the gospel with people here in your high school, but you're going to somehow go to another country where you don't speak the language, people you've never met before. Are you sure you're going to share the gospel with them instead of just doing a VBS for, a bunch of kids? Mm-hmm. Not that that's not important, but I think that short-term missions has severely missed the mark. Yes. And light up the comments and tell me, what you think of that. But it's I will move on here a little bit because what I think we're seeing here is this distinction, right, between communities, between who we're close to and who we're far from. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, I think that there is a point to be made here. This idea that, we have to look after our own first, or we're no good to anyone. I think that there is a valid point to be made there, which is that we do have a greater responsibility for those who are in our closest communities, right? Because we all exist within communities, but not one. Think of it like a target, right? You're part of a family, you're part of a neighborhood, part of a town, a state, a nation, and then a global community. But then, of course, within that, we also have the local church. We have the sort of corporate church, denominationally, but then the global church as well, the body of Christ. And so we do have a greater responsibility for those in our closest communities, right? This principle of subsidiarity, that we are called to be the most effective units at the smallest units. Yeah. So who's the best equipped person to make sure that my son is fed at night? My wife and I, as a family. I'm not trusting the state of Missouri to take care of that because they have other purposes. Instead, it's our jobs as his parents. And for that matter, so if there's a kid in my house that is starving, I'm most responsible for that. If there's a kid in my neighborhood that's starving, I'm less responsible for that, but still somewhat responsible. If there's a kid starving in the other side of the country, I still should help with that, but it's not as much my direct responsibility. Right. I know that sounds really jaded, but if we shouldn't be caring more for them than we are for our own people. I mean, Jesus even spoke against that. He said, those who are not taking care of their parents, that are not taking care of their children, are worse than unbelievers, right? And we see that there's even a responsibility to the government that's outlined in Scripture too. And so, I mean, we actually get a good picture of this even within this within the show, within the church. We get a good picture of that we were kind of circling around earlier, which is that how do we make the distinctions, the necessary distinctions between those who are in our community and those who are in adjacent communities that we can still care for, right? In the church, we have denominations and we have local churches, but we still identify as a larger community, the body of Christ. We have reasons for distinctions between Baptists and Presbyterians. Those distinctions exist for a reason, but that's not because we say we are true believers, you are not true believers. And so I think that that's a pretty good illustration of how community can work at those larger levels where we have a greater responsibility for those that are in our closer ones. But Ephesians 2 speaks to this really well. But now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. Verse 19 says, so then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. In this show, Maria reminds Joel, you were a refugee too, right? And so what are we supposed to do with people who are outside of our community? Well, they took Joel in, they took Jesse in, right? They raised him, they took care of him. All of these people were refugees, just like we were, right? We were all aliens. We were all strangers from the Lord, enemies, in fact, of the Lord. And we were brought into that communion and community with him. And so this idea of community in a Christian context is so much more meaningful than just a group of people that you're buddies with and you decide not to kill each other. It's people with whom you share a core identity and purpose, to your earlier point. But we also see an ugly side of community, which is tribalism, right? And in this story, we see that we have characters who justify what they do, but view what the other does as evil. Right. And so we've got the discussion between Isaac and representing the wolves. And we've got this boy that he's torturing that represents, he's one of the scars. And they're justifying what they do, condemning what the other does. And they're just in this cycle of violence. They're even conscripting children and corrupting them in this effort. But we even see a little bit of a Good Samaritan parallel. Did you catch that at all in episode 7, where Ellie is, trying to figure out what to do with this whole situation? She sees the boy who needs to be helped.
No, I actually didn't.
So she sees someone who needs to be helped, and she thinks, I got to go play a role here. And then what's Jesse's response to that whole thing? She wants to go help the boy that's attacked by the wolves.
He essentially points out how many there are of the wolves versus 2 of them. They'll be killed.
They'll be killed. It won't work. And he's like, this isn't our war. These people are killing each other. I'm not going to die here. I'm not going to die for them. I mean, he did die there, but he didn't know that.
R.I.P. Jesse.
But what struck me about that is that what she's ultimately saying is, who is my neighbor? Right? It strikes me as when Jesus says to love your neighbor, some of the people said, well, who's that? Trying to justify themselves. And so he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, a man who was beaten by those of ill intent. And then he is passed by those who were supposed to be in his community. But one of the other came along and cared for him. And so he basically said, that's your neighbor, even though you're in different antagonistic groups to one another. That's the one who you were called to care for, is even the ones that you don't like, essentially. And so in this case, Ellie wanted to care for that person, sort of. She had a violent tendency towards harming people who were harming others. And I think that you could justify it as a Good Samaritan sort of mentality. It's not a one-to-one for sure. But I just thought that was kind of interesting, because you could kind of turn that into a Good Samaritan story, except that there's direct violence involved. But then, of course, what we see is that, it's not that they're friends of the Seraphites, because once she gets washed up on their shore, they're pretty quick to attack and kill her too.
Yep. That kid was ruthless.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, we don't need this one. But there's loyalty, right? We see that there's tribalism. There's loyalty within Abby's crew, within the Jackson crew, within the Seraphites, within the Wolves. And ultimately, we see that Ellie's desire for revenge is even stronger than her desire to protect her community. And that's a really startling, but not super shocking realization, that her community was Joel. Her community is gone. She's broken and doesn't know where to go. And so she is always getting these chances to turn back and considering them, but moving forward anyway. And in the end, that endangers Dina, it endangers the baby and Tommy, and ultimately gets Jesse killed, all because of her selfishness.
Yep.
And that actually fits really well with how we view ourselves versus other groups. I've been reading up on some of this lately, the way that we interact with certain topics mentally and cognitively. And it turns out that when we're part of a group, we see the out group as the problem. Fair enough. But it turns out that the aggression for the other, for the out group, is actually stronger than the unity within the in group. And so people are more easy to get riled up in terms of a defensive posture rather than a supportive posture within their group. And goodness, that makes so much sense, right? It makes so much sense in terms of the way that our culture and our society is based at the moment. But anyway, so this whole theme of community, I know that was rambly, I apologize, but it's kind of a tangled web in terms of the value of that. We see that Jesse and Ellie really contrast in terms of their selfishness versus selflessness, how they view themselves as part of the communities that they are part of. And for the most part, I would say that Jesse fits much more closely with the biblical model of what that entails. I mean, would you agree he's a pretty decent
100%
figure?
Yeah, and that whole conflict between him and Ellie, Ellie tries to point out the morality of it. Like, you think I'm the bad guy here, but you're the bad guy too. And tries to point out that, he just let the Seraphite boy get carried off. And it's like, well, he was also thinking rationally where you were thinking emotionally. He's saying there's two of us. There's no way we would have lived. We would have both gotten killed for someone who would just kill us also. Like, he's actually looking out for Ellie in that moment, where Ellie then tries to twist the morality and says, you're just as bad as I am. And the reality isn't. He isn't. He is living out legitimately what he said he was living out, which was thinking of the community. He was thinking of Ellie in that moment. He knew her frame. He knew how she would act. He pulls her back a couple times. Like, he's living that out. So 100%. Even him coming back to the aquarium is a clear sign of the selflessness that has been instilled in him when caring for others. Or the way he dies. He dies by full sprinting to go protect Tommy and Dina. Like full sprint.
Yeah.
He gives his life for him. 100%. That is the biblical Christian communal ethic right there.
Yeah. I mean, and he could have justified leaving Ellie and Dina out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, they made their choice. It's not in the best interest of the community for us to go after them. But what he's ultimately seeing is that they are part of the community. Part of our community is gone, and we need to bring them back. And ultimately, what I think that illustrates well, it's almost like, you know, Christ talking about the good shepherd leaving the 99 to go after the one. He's not abandoning the 99,
nope.
Right? They're safe. They're taken care of. He's going and getting the one, or in this case, the two, right? That's what Jesse seems to be
the three
illustrating. Right. With Tommy. Yeah, exactly.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
The baby.
The baby. Right. And I guess that's the other thing too, is that Ellie is, one, she's a child, right? She's 19, but she's still a child. And two, she's not a parent. You know, she can say, I'm going to be a dad all I want. She didn't change the way Jesse did.
No,
when Jesse found out he was going to be a father.
Yep.
She didn't change the way that Dina did when Dina found out she was going to be a mother. Ellie's still very much the same because it hasn't truly affected her.
Well, think about how
it's affected them.
Think about how she responds to Dina when she sees her at the start of episode 7 here. Like, it immediately becomes a conversation about her.
Right.
Dina just had an arrow, like, ripped
she kind of
through
like
her
looks
cat.
at it.
Like, yeah.
But yeah.
Look at it and then just move on. I did horrible things. Like, Ellie, stop it. You have a pregnant woman that you claim to love that has just been injured, could have lost her life, could have lost the baby's life, and yet you're over here, I did bad things. Like,
yeah,
come on. Show a little consideration.
It was a pretty male move. I mean, just throwing that out there, you know. And given one of our earlier talking points, I'm like, oh, that's a guy thing to do right there. But
yeah, I think a real man would have stopped and actually checked on his pregnant wife there.
That's fair. Yeah,
That's what a real man would have done.
A real man, yeah. Well, good stuff. I think there's so much more we could talk about with this. And I want to go ahead and kick off our lightning round. To be honest, we've already kind of gotten into a lot of these points. And so we probably won't spend a lot of time on this. But this is where we like to pick up our kind of receive, reject, redeem points. Anything in the story that we can start with reject. Anything that we should say this doesn't align with Scripture, with the the way that we're understand that we're supposed to see the world and live our lives, and then receive. Those are the ideas that we can take more or less as they're presented in the story, and then the redeem point is something that's quite close. And so, did anything jump out to you as a reject point from this show?
I mean, just now talking about the community aspect, we need to reject Ellie's notion of essentially living for self, and that's a big area there to reject.
Yeah, I would agree. That tribalism that we see there too, the notion that just because someone's in an outside community, they don't deserve any help or protection. I mean, it's a tricky situation there.
Sure is.
Like, I think Jesse probably did the right thing, but at the same time, you could easily see that justifying, refusing to help others.
Yep. Scriptures say also, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And so we need to reject the notion that we are deserving of seeing our vengeance met.
Yeah.
I mean, that's this whole storyline, right?
Right.
And we see what it leads Ellie into, and we see actually what her vengeance does to the people around her. So sin is not just personal, it is also communal.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. I mean, because ultimately it's her sin is affecting not just herself and Dina
and the baby.
It's affecting Tommy and the baby. Tommy and Jesse.
Yep.
And this community that was going to depend on Jesse as a leader is now going to be suffering without him.
And it affected Mel, who lost her life and lost the baby's life, and it affected Owen, and it's affecting Abby, and it affected Nora.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
And by the way, it's affecting another community, right? Abby's disappearance is affecting another community. It's affecting the wolves, which
Yeah.
we don't know if the wolves are morally right or the cult is morally right. We don't know which is right in this situation because they haven't fleshed out that
It
storyline
seems
for
awful
us.
murky. It's hard to imagine either of them really being in the right.
Yep.
In my mind, but
Which
based
side
on
you're
what we've seen
supposed
so
to
far,
pick? Yeah.
yeah. Well, the filmmakers seem to really like messing with that notion of, and I think honestly that to be honest, as much as I really enjoy this show and as much as I appreciate what the filmmakers have done, some of the comments they've made in their podcasts and in their clips, I think are actually worth rejecting too. You know, the notion that, oh, Jesse wasn't any more right than Ellie was in his assertion. It's just a matter of, you know, oh, if you were in his shoes, you'd see it differently. If you were in her shoes, you'd see it differently. It's like, she's seeking revenge. She's
Yeah.
seeking to care. That's a very different
Very
thing.
different. Yeah.
And yeah. And so as far as reject points, I mean, we've already said this one a couple times now, but Dina and Ellie's relationship is a reject, right? Because scripture's quite clear about homosexuality. And we've already explored that a little bit in this show as well. So we can just kind of leave it at that. But as far as points that are worth receiving or redeeming, I'll throw this one out there because we've already addressed it. The sanctity of life, the value of the human life that the characters in this show can't help but exhibiting. I mean, that's straight up receive point. They're absolutely right. Their image bearing nature is crying out to the value of that life that is tragically taken in this episode.
We should redeem the idea of purpose or living with a purpose and redeem it in light of the biblical understanding of what humanity's purpose is, which is to glorify God. So we should redeem that. Also, legacy. Man, that was such a big theme within the episode for Joel. And that's a big deal. The legacy that we leave our kids, the legacy that we leave our communities, the legacy we leave upon the world, not for our own glory, but for the sake of others. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one last thing in terms of a redeem point is it's not exactly even a redeem point. It's just one thing that this show doesn't give us is a clear Christ figure. That's one thing that we do a lot on Popcorn Theology. We figure out, okay, who's the character that is closest to Christ? Who's the one
Jesse's
that...
pretty close.
He is pretty close. He's
pretty close.
Selfless, self-sacrificial. He protects with violence, but not at all costs. He is probably the closest that we get. But ultimately, I don't think that we get any real true heroes or Christ figures in this show. Instead, what we really get is a showcase in the ways in which humans fall short in loving their family and loving their community. And it kind of points back to the way that we all fall short of the Lord's perfect standard. Joel is not a Christ figure. Ellie's not a Christ figure. And we are all the better for it because their shortcomings are human shortcomings. And so, if we were to try and contrast that, right? So we get almost an inverted picture where, unlike Joel, we see that God the Father is willing to give his one and only child for the world. John 3:16, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Unlike Ellie, Jesus is willing to forgive those who are enacting justice, or I guess vengeance in their case. As he was being crucified, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." So unlike Ellie, Jesus is willing to forgive those. Unlike both Ellie and Joel, Jesus did not act selfishly, right? Hebrews 12:2 talks about Jesus enduring the cross, despising the shame for the joy that was set before him. And he was not acting selfishly, even though he was tempted to do so in the Garden of Gethsemane. He chose not to. And also, unlike both Ellie and Joel, it pleased the Father to bruise the Son. And that heartbreaking sequence in episode 2, where Joel is beaten and bruised, Isaiah 53:10 says, "Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him." Right? It's not that the Lord was enjoying what was happening. It was that there was a greater purpose that was set before the Lord in the sacrifice of his one true son.
The satisfaction of his wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly. And praise God that we're not getting a Christ figure that is like Joel.
Yeah. Or Ellie.
Or Ellie. Right. Because unlike both of them as well, the Lord doesn't love us by lying to us, by concealing the truth from us, right? Instead, we're told that we are to be sanctified in the word of the Lord, which is truth, and that Jesus is described as the way, the truth, and the life, and the only way to the Father. And so in this whole story, what we're really seeing is a man making a choice, right? Proverbs tells us that there's a decision that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. And this is the outworking of that. We get a really good inverted picture of Christ, where unlike Joel and Ellie in this story, we see a father willing to give up the one and only child, willing to forgive those that are enacting vengeance, acting selflessly. We see that God was pleased to bruise the son in order to sacrifice for the world, for his community, and that we see that the Lord loves us with truth and not with lies. So there's a really remarkable imagery of the truth of Scripture, even in a broken world of The Last of Us.
Yeah, and in an imperfect representation of that too.
Yeah.
Man, good Christ connection
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
I'm glad you made it.
When it's missing, it's hard to find, right? But it's, in a sense, there's a God-shaped hole. There's a Christ-shaped hole in this story too. Yeah. Right? Just like there is in our hearts, there's a Christ-shaped hole in the narrative of season 2 of this show, and season 1 for that matter, that we don't really get what we know that this world ultimately would be saved by. It's not Ellie's blood. It's the blood of Christ.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
dude, we did
fantastic.
it. 7 weeks,
Yep.
7 episodes. We've come to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Roll the credits.
I was going to say, yeah.
We've done it. If
we roll the credits, or should we cut to black?
You know what? Let's not even do our outro. Let's just cut to black at this point. Let's see if everyone checks in for season 3.
There we go. Who knows how it's going to end, right? Well, before we do get to the end here and have the little spoiler clip, we probably won't have one of those, but we do want to remind you guys to like and share this episode, get the word out there, broaden the conversation, consider supporting us on Patreon, joining the community, our community, if you will, in that way, our little Jackson, if you will, and all that stuff, right? Rate, review, like and share, subscribe for more episodes, follow us for more content like this. Jan, thank you for the pleasure of 7 weeks, sticking with this show through thick and thin.
Yeah, man.
And,
it's
and
been
diving
real.
into it for sure. Absolutely. Well, until next time, everyone, keep engaging movies, TV shows, and media from a godly perspective. And remember, you are not. Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.